So good evening and welcome to our third end of life planning session. And tonight we have Skeet Wooten and Deacon John Doherty to talk about financial planning. And so I invite Skeet to go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Father Zeb. Thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation. I know it's always uncomfortable for people to contemplate the end of their life, but there are certain things that make good business sense for people to do. A long time prior to that event happening, it will ease the burden on your family going forward if you do a lot of things while you're still of sound mind and body and candidly know where things are. But the first thing I would like to recommend that people do, and as simple as it may seem, a lot of people, most people don't do this, and that's actually write down on a piece of paper what I will call a personal organizer. And on that, you have your name, your address, your social security number, your date of birth. All of this stuff may be well known within your family, but it's good to have it written down in case someone doesn't know. You need to list who your attorney is, who your CPA is, who your insurance agent is, where you have your brokerage accounts, where you have your banking accounts. The numbers of those accounts are always very, very important. You need to remember to list where your will is. Is it in a safety deposit box? Is it in the bottom drawer of your dresser? Things like that. Again, these are all very basic things, but you don't want to be in a situation where people are after the fact trying to figure out where things are. Something else that's important is that you need to plan ahead, not only for eventually a death, but also an incapacity. If you have a brokerage account, for example, and you become incapacitated, unless you have a power of attorney, no one can transact business for you. And you don't want to be in a situation where something needs to be done and you can't do it. You can't count on your broker to do it without having discretionary authority. And most of them do not have that. If you have a trust, you should have whoever the trustee is that's listed. If it is you, it's always a good idea to have a co-trustee that is someone else that you trust. And if not a trustee, then again, you potentially can use a power of attorney for someone to act on your behalf. Do you have a life insurance policy? If you do, again, where's the policy? Who is your agent? And where those people can get their hands on that information. If when it comes to your home, if you have a mortgage on your home, where the mortgage is. If you do not, and you happen to have the abstract, where that is. That's a very important thing that a lot of people forget about. But if your heirs go to sell the home and you don't have an abstract, that has to be recreated, and that's a very expensive thing to do. So it's a good thing to have a list of where all of those things are. If you own a second home, again, the information about where the home is, where the abstract is, who the local attorney, a real estate agent that worked with you on that property, so you can understand, or so your next of kin can understand where things are. It's very important to do this. There are really 5 basic things that you need to do when you sit down and do an estate plan. And these are not just for wealthy people. These are for just regular people like us. The first thing and most important is you need to have a will. And if you do not have a will, you can do a simple will with an attorney. You can go online. There are some wills that you can get through things like LegalZoom. And what the will does is it directs, you do several things. You appoint someone to handle your affairs after you're gone, and you direct where you want things to go. And it is a fairly simple document, but it's a very, very important, critically important actually, that you have that. If you don't have a will and you pass away, then you die in what they call intestate, and that means that the state will determine where your assets go. So if you have three children and one of them is a spendthrift and the other two are not, um, they all would share equally, and you may not have wanted that to happen. Um, so it's important that you do that. The second thing, and again, this is for everyone, not just for rich people. It would be smart to establish a revocable living trust. And what the trust does, um, it determines where the assets will go on your death, similar to what a will do. Um, but it also keeps your information private. If you die without a trust, you have to go to probate court, and the information that is filed in probate court is public information. So anyone could go and look up and see what was going on with your financial affairs. So it keeps things a little quieter. I've mentioned briefly a moment ago about a power of attorney. There are two that people should do. One is a healthcare power of attorney, which, uh, as everyone knows, that gives someone the right to make decisions for you in as a proxy if you become incapacitated. The other is a durable power of attorney, which that in essence is appointing an agent to act on your behalf should you not be able to make decisions for yourself. It's very important that you have someone in that position. It could be the same one that's your healthcare power of attorney, but it's someone that you trust very, very much because it's a very important position. And the last of the five important documents, you need a living will. And that is simply that's a document that will uh, say that you do not want to be resuscitated in the event of something that happens. Make sure that your physician has a copy of that on file. For older folks, it's a good idea to have a copy of that candidly in your nightstand, because if something happens and a paramedic comes up and says to your spouse, do you have a DNR, do not resuscitate, and you say yes, they need to see it. If they can't see it, they are obligated legally to try to resuscitate that person. So it can, and that can be against the wishes of the person that is having the event. Um, so it's important that you have those five things. Um, how often should you update your will and your estate plan? Well, that's something that is kind of an individual uh, situation. That what has happened in your life that has changed? Have you gotten married? Have you gotten divorced? Have you had grandchildren? Have you had kids? In each of those major life events usually dictates that you need to look at updating what your estate plan is. If it's a second marriage, um, how are the assets titled? If you want to leave something to your spouse in a what we would call a living trust or a marital trust that would take care of the spouse for the balance of their life and then be distributed to your children. Uh, it's important to do that after that event happens. If you've been divorced, you need to make sure that you change uh, the beneficiaries on your life insurance policy, your 401k plan, your IRA, uh, an annuity that you may have. So there are all kinds of things that factor into that. But usually, it's a good rule of thumb to review your estate plan every 5 to 7 years. If you have events that have happened in your life that have caused your financial situation to change, perhaps you need to do that more often. But it's something that you should proactively do. Um, and the last thing that I will talk about, um, oftentimes, you wonder, okay, I've got all of these records. what do I need to keep? How long do I need to keep it? Um, Quite simply, what you need, the permanent records you need to keep are those important life-changing documents. Um, if you have adopted a child, you need to keep those papers. Um, you need to keep, obviously, your birth certificate, uh, your passport, a citizenship paper, um, any death certificates, your college diploma, just to prove that, yes, indeed, you did graduate. Um, if you are divorced, you need to keep a copy of your divorce decree. If you are a guardian for someone, you need to keep that. Um, any health records. It would be a smart thing for most people to go through their home with a camera. I mean, it's easy to do now with your telephone, and take pictures of rooms in your house, those valuables that you have, because those are all important documents and important things that you need to keep a record of, especially in the event that something happens. Um, you know, Not because you die, but if your house catches on fire, you need to have a record of what you have, because if you have to file an insurance claim, you need to be able to prove to the insurance company that, yes, I indeed had that dustable, that antique thing that I got from my grandmother. Um, Make sure if you still have your social security card that you keep that. There are other things too. I don't want to go into every individual one, but again, you need to keep the permanent important records. Temporary records, keep your bank statements for about 5 years, and then shred them or burn them. Any credit card statements, same type of thing. If you have made purchases and improvements on your home, you need to keep them typically as long as you have the home. But if you move, then you can get rid of them. Your brokerage and bank statements can be reproduced, so you should probably keep those at least a year, probably two. But you don't need to keep them in perpetuity at all. And you've noticed this lately because banks no longer return check stubs. So that's one of the things. Um, Most people today don't have stock certificates. Most of those are now, everything is done in what we call book entry form. But if you do have stock certificates, make sure they are in a very safe place, and you don't accidentally throw those away. Um, any the registration to your car, any car titles, things like that. Those are all temporary things. You should keep them as long as you have the vehicle. But once you trade on to another car, it's certainly fine to get rid of those. Um, that's a very basic, very brief, very sort of high level um, look at this. If you have any questions and would like to get a little bit more in depth, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. My telephone number is in the church directory. But um, it it's important also, and this is not something that's prepared, but it's very important that you talk to your family, that you tell your family what it is you're doing. Um, the last thing that you want to do is surprise your children or your grandchildren after you're gone, because if there are things that happen that raise questions, they can't be answered. So it's very important that you talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids. I mean, the level of specificity, that's a personal thing, but it's important that they know, especially if it's unpleasant news, up front, because it's easier to deal with those situations while you're still around than it is after the fact. So um, I would say that it is really in your best interest to be more forthcoming and more transparent than less. I know people sometimes don't want to disclose to their children what's going to happen or how much money they have or whatever. But I really feel like it's better to set the expectations early, than to surprise people later. So again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Zeb, thank you for the opportunity to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Skeet. Yeah, and I think that is so important to have those conversations with your loved ones, to just let them know what's going to happen after you're gone. And now we have Deacon John. He will be talking about giving to the church.
Yeah, many of you know me, but if you don't, I'm a deacon at St. Paul's and work on the financial aspects of the church. So I'm mainly going to talk tonight about how we remember St. Paul's or any organization on a financial basis as we prepare for the end of our life. And there's many ways to do this, and there are a few methods that are used most regularly. It's called planned giving, and I want to emphasize that do this planning early. It's not a planning that wants to be rushed or done in the later stages of life when, frankly, we may be incapacitated, or even when we're young. I myself had a close call with death, and thank goodness I had many things in place, but some things did not have, a living will near me, things like that Skeet mentioned. So please do this early. It's not something to put off until you're of a certain age. We all think that's down the road. And please do this in consultation with your family and loved ones and with trusted financial and legal advisors. There's many benefits, and it enables sometimes to provide more than we would have thought possible to our heirs through a reduction in taxes, and to make a larger gift to those we remember after we're gone. So of the different methods to remember St. Paul's, I think probably the one we see most often, and perhaps the easiest and most common, is to leave a bequest in your will. Now, of course, you have to have a will to do this, but it can be a set amount. That's what we often see, just a set dollar amount. It can be a percentage of your estate, or on a more rare occasion, we're named as a contingent beneficiary. Basically, it's split up among other named heirs, and then the church would be the last in line, so to speak, of what's left after all the other named beneficiaries have gotten what they were entitled to in the will. Again, tell your family about this, and so it's not a surprise if you're doing something that's unexpected. Now, we do sometimes receive gifts of other kind of assets, such as real estate, possessions, closely held stocks, retirement accounts, or life insurance policies. And I'll just speak very briefly about those. We'll tell you that real estate or property gifts require an appraisal, and that's done at the donor's expense. And the church can and may choose not to accept certain gifts if there are restrictions or known risk factors involved that would jeopardize the fiduciary responsibility of the church in accepting those. That would be more of a liability than accepting a true gift. And I'll get more into detail on each one of those. And we'll mention one of the simplest ways, and this is the way you're not actually giving yourself, but name the church for memorial contributions. Tell your family and whoever's going to write your obituary, or perhaps you're doing that yourself, but make it clear that you would like the church or whatever organization. Maybe you want to be sure and name a human rights organization, the Animal Rescue League, whoever. Make it clear, or actually write that down yourself. Oftentimes it's later, after the fact, families will say, oh, we should have done that. Why didn't we think of that? You know, Grandpa Joe loved that organization, gave his life to it. Why wouldn't we have named them? There's other ways, and I'm not too familiar with them, and I don't want to get into detail those about giving a remainder of a trust or a charitable annuity and things like that. Again, each one of those has financial implications that differ, and you do want to talk to a legal and financial advisor before you get into any of those. Now, as a person who often receives the first notice of financial gifts to the church, and then eventually the funds, I do have a unique perspective on this, and I would offer some advice about the estate gifts. At St. Paul's anyway, and this varies with any organization, but we have rules which we call our canons that tells us a legacy gift of any kind which comes to us without restrictions, such as a set amount bequeathed to us. It's required to go into our cathedral endowment. So if you have a desire to have no restrictions, or you want increased restrictions on its use, you have to make that known. So again, in your writing on the will, please use wording that enable us to understand your intent. And that being said, the church may not accept contingent conditions that are not part of their mission, such as a set amount that has to be used in a very specific ways that the church really had no intention of going down that road. Yeah, it's better to either leave the church more latitude than this, but it's really best to have a discussion with the church or the institution you're thinking of giving to itself, and find out what there are their rules. You probably can find them out online if you don't want to talk to somebody in person, but find out what their policies are. Life insurance policies are a good way to give sizable gifts. And there's various ways to do this. One of them is to buy a new policy and make the church the owner and the beneficiary. And this may be a way to leverage a gift and make it a much larger gift than you might otherwise think is possible. Again, talk to a financial advisor. Depending on your age, the premiums may be very high, or maybe you've had a life insurance for a long time that's all paid up. You don't think your family's going to need it. You can make St. Paul's or another organization the beneficiary of that policy. One way to do this is you can make contributions to your church that would pay the premium of an insurance policy. And those donations to the church that pay the premium are actually tax deductible. So that's another way to leverage a sizable gift through a life insurance policy. Now, I'm not a life insurance policy salesperson, so I'm not trying to do that, but just another way. We do see people give large gifts to the church by donating a life insurance policy, paid up or not. If it's not paid up, though, again, you can donate it to the church and donate the premiums as they come due. Another thing you can do is donate the remainder of a retirement account that may be not used in its entirety during your lifetime. It's taxed differently if it's given to an organization. Basically, it passes through without taxes. Where if you leave it to your family, you have to look at what your own tax rate is, or your state's tax rate will be. So do again, review these with your attorney or financial advisors and see if that might be appropriate for you to think about. Again, simplest thing to do is be clear with your family and loved ones and with your lawyer as you prepare a will, if you'd like St. Paul's to be named and what the amount would be or how they would be named. And if you'd like to have St. Paul's or some other organization named as recipient of memorial contributions, create your own obituary beforehand, include it there. And sometimes it's not so much about the money, but it touches my heart, I know, when I see someone name an organization that they were fond of and spent their life, working in or for, as a place for memorials to be given. One thing to know about memorials, they do go into our general fund at the church unless they're otherwise designated. And so this is another place where, if you're thinking, well, I'd like people to remember St. Paul's upon my death, but I'd like the money to go to a certain mission or ministry, contact the church and make sure that that is appropriate and all the mechanisms are in place to receive your money without undue duress on you or your survivors. It's a very simple thing to do, but I think as we look at our last days, we want to look back at the things that we have loved, and be it St. Paul's, your family, your loved ones, other organizations or institutions that have meant much to you, or will mean a lot to the next generation, and you want to support them. Go ahead and do that. If you have any questions about some of these things, and especially about how it works best at St. Paul's to have these structured, feel free to call St. Paul's and ask for me, Deacon John. Again, your lawyer or your financial advisor should advise you on all these things. I'm definitely speaking on behalf of someone who loves the church and would like to have people remember the church in their last days, if it's possible. And there's no amount that's too small. It's all meaningful. And it's really the remembering that's the most important thing. Thank you, Father Zeb. I appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight, and be glad to answer any questions as people might have them farther down the road. And this has been a real blessing. And I can tell you that over the years, St. Paul's has been the beneficiary of many people who have remembered them in all ways, from small gifts to very large ones. And they make a huge impact over generations, particularly as our endowments grow and we have money for mission and ministry that we wouldn't have otherwise. So God bless you, and do this while you're still young, and think about it, and not something you want to have to worry about and think about later on in your life.
Thank you, Deacon John. Yeah, I think it's good to always, remember those that you love and think about how you can share gifts with them even after you're gone. I think to close out tonight, it feels appropriate to me to use one of our sentences that's usually used at the offering time, but it speaks to me tonight. So let us walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, an offering and sacrifice to God. Have a good night.